and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up. It's the Friday show, so no news segment because I was hosting another amazing hangout where I think there's about 50 people there, and we had a great time with stand-up subscribers, and was so grateful that so many of you hung out for so long last night. I also was in the city doing television yesterday, so that'll air tonight on News Nation. I highly recommend that panel. I was fiery as can be, I think. Definitely check out or tape the Dan Abrams show on News Nation if you get it. I thought that was pretty good. I was on the whole hour. But today I've got a great conversation with SE Cupp about what the hell happened in the House. How did we get here? I think we have some disagreements on this, but I thought it was a pretty good, granular, nuanced conversation with SE Cupp, who still fashions herself a conservative. You can watch her on CNN and read her at the Daily News and follow her on all the social medias. She's big on Instagram, and I am really good friends with SE. I always love talking to her about just about almost anything, so I really wanted to get some of my favorite women on this week, seeing as that I had a lot of great guys last week, and I think we did a pretty good job. Unfortunately, I didn't get a show up Wednesday, but I'm planning on getting some more stuff up over the weekend, and I hope that you have a great Friday and a great weekend. But here now, my conversation with SE Cupp. Let's do it. Okay, well, there she is, SE Cupp, and she was, as she often is, but I'm always happy to see it at the big people table on the important time, like in the studio after big events. Your first string at CNN. I was very happy to see you covering the Kevin McCarthy stuff. I mean, lots to say, of course.
Yeah, it was a wild day. I woke up on Tuesday thinking I wasn't going anywhere, and then I get a call. Can you come in this afternoon? I said, yeah, and it's for 1 hour, and then it's, can you stay for the next? And then it's, can you stay for the next? And cut to midnight, and I'm still there because it was a long night. And this is what cable news does, but it was also an unprecedented historical event, and there was a lot coming at you quickly. There was the vote and all of those machinations. And then after the vote, everyone comes out and Matt Gaetz is speaking and McCarthy is speaking. And then the other 8, Republicans are speaking. You want to get all of it. And so it was a long day, an important day, and we'll do it all again next week.
Right. Yeah. We can talk about what's coming up. But let me just look back and do a bit of an autopsy in terms of what do you think about the strategy here? I mean, it seems like a lot of people, smart people, were surprised, but that it did go down the way it went down, that Kevin McCarthy basically said, bring it on, and then didn't ask for or try to negotiate with Democrats. I guess he hoped maybe they would save him, but why would they? They didn't. All of them voted together. What about the strategy from the Democrats, McCarthy's strategy, or Gaetz's, which doesn't seem to be much of a strategy other than burn it all down?
Right. So let's start there. Gaetz's strategy has always been coming into the House to be a destructor, and he's in there for attention. He's in there for fame and celebrity and money. He is explicitly not in there to govern or solve problems. We know that's not what he's interested in at all. So this was one of his stunts. You remember when he stormed the skiff with other Republicans a while back, an impeachment hearing that many of them were, in fact, invited to. So it was completely pointless. But these kind of stunts are what Matt Gaetz is known for. That's his quote unquote strategy. McCarthy, I think, thought he might get some Dem support because they might think they would get someone worse, more intransigent, more hardline than McCarthy. And it's funny because I talked to a lot of Democrats on Tuesday as this was all unfolding. I was making my calls and trying to get some people on the record. And I talked to a bunch who said, had he not trashed us on Meet the Press, like 2 days before this went down, I bet he would have gotten maybe not all Democrats, but some Democratic support. So it wasn't out there that he thought he could survive it, which is why I think he said, bring it on. Or bring it, whatever.
He also did the same thing. Apparently, there's reporting to the Biden White House, and privately he would say that Biden's actually sounds pretty good privately, and then publicly he would go out and say that Joe Biden's senile. And the White House held a grudge, apparently.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think they trusted McCarthy in the end, obviously, and they shouldn't have. McCarthy's craven. I came up with the Young Guns, and so I've known Kevin McCarthy. And his ambitions to be speaker, which he will tell you started in childhood. So he was so ambitious that he suffered these indignities coming into the speakership conceding that one guy could take him out on a whim. And then to the Democrat strategy, I can hear both sides saying, well, and not ideological sides. I was on with Andrew Yang the other night, who said Democrats should have come to the table to sort this out. Then the other argument is, why would they bail out Republicans and in fact enable them to keep up the dysfunction? They should say, you're dysfunctional. We're not saving you from your dysfunction. Figure your dysfunction out and come back when you want to govern and work with us. I think that's probably where I would land on that argument. But I hear from interesting people, non-Republican hacks, that Democrats could have done more.
Well, if the only thing, I've read some analysis about that too, basically laid out all the possible things that they could maybe have asked for and maybe gotten, maybe not gotten. But I think they settled on the best thing they could have gotten, Democrats, in any kind of negotiation, was to go back to the regular rules when it comes to passing a budget and rules committees and so on, because that more than anything else would make a difference. But the Democratic base would have gone nuts on, well, maybe not the people that would have voted for him, that maybe they would be more moderate or something and it would look like they're trying. But what do you think?
I think if the outcome was going to be Democrats helped save Kevin McCarthy, both Democrats and Kevin McCarthy would have had to condition all of their voters for that possible outcome so that it wasn't shocking and awful and controversial. And they didn't spend any time doing that, right? McCarthy didn't whip Democrats. McCarthy didn't make the case publicly that he should be saved to get work done and get stuff done and bridge a divide with Democrats. And Democrats didn't make the case publicly that Kevin McCarthy should be saved. So that would have been that's possible, but they would have need to have, I think, preempted that outcome with some really good PR and marketing.
And I'm not sure that there's any good enough that would have really worked, but interesting to think about how it might have come out. We know the way it came out. You've got a piece at the Daily News, your latest column, McCarthy Gates what he deserves and we all pay. And you mentioned...
Can I just stop you? Because I had like 100 puns and plays on words. And you've seen 1,000 of them this week, right? Like gates of hell.
Do you want to?
So many with that last name.
Do you want to submit any more now that we didn't get to see that outside of the one that they picked at the Daily News?
Well, I was trying to figure out how to make like speaker gates, but it wasn't quite clever enough.
Well, I like however it was settled on. McCarthy Gates what he deserves and we all pay. I just want to make 2 quick points in addition to what you're saying, and you can unpack it a bit, but. Steve Bannon is behind Matt Gaetz and the other chaos characters because of his ideological belief about tearing down the administrative state, and also less ideologically, because I don't think there's a lot of credence intellectual to that idea. I think the more interesting and obvious one, because I worked with Steve Bannon for a year, shared a studio with him, he's trying to make money with his podcast. That's it.
Yeah,
So say whatever. So he's running this great thing, number one, and number two, Matt Gaetz has been credibly accused by several women, most recently Cassidy Hutchinson, of really terrible, inappropriate behavior, at best, sexual assault, maybe more likely, allegedly.
On the House floor. In some cases, on the House floor.
There are many Republican congressmen who have gone on the record saying he was showing them photos. And by the way, we all know a guy who does that. And I'm not going to say he's the worst guy in the world. I'm going to say he shouldn't be the mayor of the town or a teacher or a congressman. Like, there's certain jobs you shouldn't. Maybe just fix my car if you're going to go around showing pictures. I don't mean to be a dick, but like, it doesn't matter. I don't care what your values are as much if you're just fucking driving me around. This guy's a congressman and he's doing that on the House floor. It is fucking reprehensible. And I'm glad you mentioned it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a ton of skeletons. And if McCarthy or like anyone in Republican leadership had any balls or foresight, they would have marginalized Matt Gaetz years ago, long before he got empowered for an uprising. But they didn't. And they wanted Matt Gaetz's votes, just like they wanted Marjorie Taylor Greene's voters and Lauren Boebert's voters. Nobody likes those people. Those people are contemptible and they're a pain in the butt for the Republican Party. They know it, but they cannot wean themselves off their voters. And so they tolerate them and coddle them and justify their actions. And then when they finally go ahead and do the awful thing, they're shocked and outraged. But what was your question?
The larger point, more important question that your piece answers is we can sit here and we can, as we are, criticizing Matt Gaetz for all the right reasons. But as you say, we all pay. How do we all pay for this one lunatic? And, well, 7 others potentially, but certainly him, because those 7 others weren't stepping up and doing what he did, I would argue. But go ahead.
Well, we all pay for the dysfunction. You know, you can tick down the list of things that are not getting solved right now. And we've got a looming CR in 39 days as of today. We've got Ukraine aid on the table. I did a hit for CNNI yesterday. And, you know, overseas, they really care about what's happening in the United States for Ukraine aid and a whole host of other issues for which we are seen as important negotiators and brokers. So we all pay, but it's also just kind of an embarrassment. This is humiliating for the Republican Party that they're eating their own, that they can't forget governing the country. They can't govern their own party and sort their own shit out. I mean, it's really sad and embarrassing.
So let's go back then in history a little bit. You mentioned the young guns, Eric Cantor, Kevin McCarthy, and Paul Ryan were these guys that were seen as the future of the Republican Party. But I have been making the argument that this bed has been seeded, the garden metaphor, for like, I would say since Ronald Reagan said that government is the problem. Like, if you believe that government is the problem, we're never going to be able to work together to solve problems effectively within government. And so I feel like it started there. And then obviously there's a lot of other things that happened, but I would jump to Barack Obama running and the birther conspiracy, because then, and I was calling that out then, the birther conspiracies were, I think, just as bad as climate change conspiracies. Then I thought that, and that, you know, led to, I think, so much of what we have. Paul Ryan gone, John Boehner gone, Eric Cantor lost in a primary. Now Kevin McCarthy, the final one, gone, because there are so many Americans that fully support Donald Trump and his conspiracies, and they hate nice people, as you wrote about in your piece before this one about Romney as a good man, who's always a good man. That's why Republicans didn't like him overwhelmingly. I mean, 20% or something did, but I mean, because they like mean people who punch you in the face, I guess. But I feel like it's been this way for a long time, and we can't even agree that government solves problems all day, every day.
I agree with you that it's been happening for a long time, and I see your point. I'll add, I think populism, also ushered in by Reagan, is to blame. I don't think there's any problem with the long-held conservative philosophy that government should not be responsible for solving every problem. Private sector is good at solving problems. It should be that should be unleashed. But so I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with saying the government shouldn't solve every problem. And you know, that was in a reaction to a New Deal, too, that, you know, really expanded the government. And I think that pushback was good, just philosophically. But populism, and especially the angry wave of populism that came in and continued through the Tea Party, where there was like an anti-elitism, right? And that included expertise, people who had been there before and done it, the quote unquote establishment. These were all enemies now. And so if the establishment, i.e. people who know what they're doing because they've been doing it, and experts, i.e. scientists or, you know, people who are good at their jobs, or the elites, people who are well educated, are the problem, you get this sort of troublemaking, counterproductive wing of a party that says, no, we need to disrupt and destruct. And that's more important than any of the policies we all agree on. That's more important than solving problems, especially if it means with the other party, with the other party's help. And it became so personality driven, which is how Trump got elected and how Mitt Romney didn't get elected, and how people like Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney were pushed out and people like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene came in. So look, I think you could teach a whole semester of a class on how the Republican Party got to this point.
Yep.
But I think it's a little of a lot of things.
How much of it do you think has to do with right-wing media over that time? Because I've always blamed right-wing media. I know we have obviously a lot of differences and nuance there, but I wrote a piece back in 2017. I don't write much. I'm not great, as you may or may not know, but I wrote for the Daily Beast. I was like, listen, I listened to this conversation between Mark Levin, one of the most popular right-wing talkers, and Senator Ron Johnson, arguably the furthest to the right senator from Wisconsin, and definitely a conspiracy theorist for a long time, specifically on climate change and obviously on election denial. And they were arguing, SE. They were, and because the difference was, it was about we should shut down the government over Obamacare. And the difference was they obviously fully agreed on the policy, but they didn't have enough votes. The point being, if you're in government, you have consequences for your actions. If you're in media, the only thing you have to do is get ratings. So you can demand that a senator, in this case, the furthest to the right, do a thing that he has no power to do. He was like, I'm a senator. What am I supposed to do? We don't have the votes. They have the Congress. We're in the Senate. We're the minority. We can't do it, Mark. You got to find out a way. There is no way. That's what I mean by that drumbeat of media demanding that Republicans in government do things that they can't do. They don't have the votes. It's not possible. There's no way to get to that.
Yeah. And I think, people like Mark Levin, like he's not a journalist. So I would separate the talking heads like Mark Levin and Sean Hannity and almost everyone at Fox now, who are, infotainment artists. All they want are the ratings, and what gets you the ratings is stoking the fear and the anger and the division and the grievances and conspiracy theories. I mean, that's, increasingly become a way of getting viewers to tune in to places like Fox News and Newsmax.
A lot of people that consider themselves on the left. I mentioned Jimmy Dore and so many others now trafficking in conspiracy theories
Rogan,
around.
Absolutely.
Yep.
But there was a time. Look, journalists should be interested in accountability. And there was a time when I came up in right-wing media, and that includes, at Town Hall and American Spectator and some other places where accountability was important. And you had journalists, people who knew how to write and think critically, like George Will, Charles Krauthammer, Jonah Goldberg, Stephen Hayes. These were some pretty heavy hitters intellectually that appeared on Fox and were in National Review, and Bill Kristol, Fred Barnes. You can disagree with them, but these were intellectuals and they were interested in accountability. And when that was being promoted, I think there was a really good voice for conservatism. Now, Fox kind of ushered that out as it ushered in birtherism and more Donald Trump and stuff like that. So Fox News being the biggest right-wing media outlet, I think is important to look at the trajectory. Of where they've gone.
Now we might focus. I always not push back, but just add to, Fox is dominant in many ways, as evidenced by the fact that Tucker Carlson clearly had a larger platform when he was there than when he's not. He was clearly more influential there than not. And by the way, your demographics matter, too. You're going to be younger viewers when you're on the internet exclusively. And, there's a lot of people. I mean, I think they're probably SE. I don't know. I meet older folks a lot. I was just at a benefit where there's a lot of, they have a hard time finding internet programming. So they're still watching cable. But like Alex Jones and Steve Bannon are very influential. And so I would add them to it, and huge conspiracy theorists. But this is where we are at now. And it's hard to imagine how the fever in any way changes if it's clearly in the tank of, most importantly, Donald Trump. We can maybe put Gates and all the rest in the House aside, because they're overwhelmingly, no one in the Republican Party can really go against Trump. Can Mike Lawler in New York, the quote moderate Republican now representing me, can he go against Trump here? I don't think he can.
No, and Trump won this week. That was a Trump victory. It was a victory for Trumpism, even though I don't think he really weighed in that much. And now he's acting like...
You're saying Trump won in terms of the House cutting off the head, or in his court trial?
Dysfunctionality is something that Trump wants. And Trump fomented this idea of loyalty tests and kicking people out, even Republicans, especially Republicans that he didn't like, right? That's how we got all these primaries, and people like Jeff Flake and Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney are gone. Ridding the party, not growing the Big Tent, but shrinking it and condensing it so it's almost entirely Trumpy was his project. And Matt Gaetz is just taking that up. And he can cloak it in the guise of like budgets and appropriations and fiscal austerity. But really, the project is this punishment, this revenge politics, and kicking Kevin McCarthy out and kicking other Republicans out is the point. That was a win for Trumpism.
Yeah.
And I think you're only going to get more of that. I don't see anyone like Jim Jordan especially coming in and ending that.
But I want to get your answer to this. I see pretty much every Republican in the House as very extremist these days, almost overwhelmingly. And the reason is, and the thing that really irks me more than anything is, again, my Congressman Mike Lawler and all of the rest of these Republicans who are openly criticizing Gates and the others. How can you do that and also support Donald Trump? How can you call them clowns, but you support Donald Trump? Right. You are creating the problem that you're trying to discredit or that you're criticizing. These children, these clowns. No, Trump runs the show. They're answering to him, and you support him. Am I right about that, A? And how, is it contradictory, B?
Well, no, and he's the worst of them. I mean, he's facing 91 counts of criminal acts. And, if you're going to criticize Matt Gaetz, you've got to criticize Donald Trump, and very few are willing to. So I think you're absolutely right. But you also, like I've said a million times, you have to be willing to take on his voters. It's one thing to say, Trump's got to go, we're tired of this. It's another thing to say, and we don't want you, Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, QAnon, conspiracy theorists, racist bigots. We don't want you anymore. Trump said, come on in, the water's warm.
Right.
And Republicans let him do that. They've got to be able to lose elections and say, we'd rather lose and get back to our conservative principles and rid the party of this awfulness than keep winning with having to make these awful bargains. That
was awesome. I really enjoyed it. As always, your time. A million more questions to ask you. You can find many of the answers in all of her writing. I don't know why I said her, like you're not still here. Thank you.
Thank you. It was always great to talk to you.
SE Cupp, everybody. What do you think? Always want to hear from you. Who do you want me to get on the show? As always, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Help me produce it. I can always use your help, your suggestions, and you sent a lot of them this week, as well as your vitamin N pictures. Get out in nature and send those to me. Read a review of the podcast on Apple and Spotify. And of course, I need your subscription. Sign up now for as little as $5 or as much as you want at patreon.com/Pete Dominic. I will be posting more over the weekend. Look forward to sharing that with you and hearing from me. standupwithpete@gmail.com. John Carroll taking us out right now.
When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could to begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand